This is Fitness Splinter's Advanced Abs and Core Workout for Strength. In this workout, we're going to go through 3 groups of 3 different exercises, and we're going to be doing 2 sets of 10 repetitions per group. Now, we haven't included a warm-up or a cool-down, so you're going to want to add those in on your own. As for the equipment, you'll need a physio ball, also known as an exercise ball, a dumbbell or some other kind of weighted object, and an optional mat. So let's go ahead and get started with group number 1, which is going to be a jackknife crunch, a back bow, and a supine oblique rotation. Starting off with that jackknife crunch, go ahead and grab some kind of weight. I'm going to be using a medicine ball, or you can use dumbbells or something else. Laying flat out on your back, nice and slow, bring those legs up, crunch those arms up as well, press that ball in between those feet or whatever weighted object you're using. Cross it back down, hovering just a bit off the ground, and then bring it right back up and cross it back into those hands. That counts as 1 repetition. So every single time you get that weight back into your hands, that's your 1 repetition. Just keep going. We've got a full 10 to go. Make sure as you crunch up towards those toes, you get that ball or whatever weight you're using up into those feet. You really crunch it up, trying to get as much of a range of motion out of as you can, really trying to get those shoulder blades up off the ground. Now, if you absolutely have to, if those abs are either starting to get tired or you just don't have that full range of motion, then go ahead and bend those knees to get those feet down close enough to place that weight in between those feet. Now, it requires a fair amount of strength on the inside of those thighs to squeeze that weight to hold them in between those feet. So definitely make sure you choose a weight that is only heavy enough that you can control with those legs. You don't want to accidentally drop that weight on yourself. So just keep it going. You got just a few more repetitions to go till we switch to our next exercise. And let it relax. Go ahead and switch over onto your stomach. Grab those dumbbells or whatever weight you're using. I'm using just a really small 3-pound weight in each hand, so you can use whatever weight you want to. Just make sure you have it evenly dispersed between left and right hand. Nice and slow. Extend those arms and legs up as high as you can. Nice tight crunch. Keep that bicep right next to your ear, so you don't want to let those hands droop, you don't want to let them come up too high. You want to try to keep it locked in line with your rib cage, so all that motion is just coming from that lower back. And we're almost done. Just 1 more repetition. Nice tight squeeze. And let it relax. Go ahead and flip back over onto your back. We're going to be doing a supine oblique rotation. Now I'm going to be doing this with just body weight. If you have the control through your obliques, then you can put a weight in between those feet again, just like you're doing for that jackknife crunch, but it makes it much more difficult. So start it out with body weight first. Just get used to it. Rotating those hips left to right. Try to keep those shoulders down on the ground as best you can. So only go as far as you can control. Only go as far as your range of motion, flexibility-wise, will allow. Making sure you're keeping those legs as straight as you possibly can. Rotating as far as is comfortable. Now, this is not only going to work those abdominal muscles, but you're also going to feel it through those obliques, a little bit into that lower back, as well as those transverse obliques. So just make sure you're really focusing on getting a nice full rotation and controlling that motion. Don't let that weight just drop. Don't let those legs just drop. You want to make sure you're keeping everything under control. Now remember, we're going to 10 repetitions on this one. If you're counting on each side, so once on the left and again on the right, then that means you're going to 20 repetitions. So we're doing 1 repetition per side. So make sure you're keeping everything under control again. Keep those lungs open. We've got just a few more repetitions to go. And we're almost done. Just 1 more on each side. And let it relax. Very good. Let's go ahead and move back over to that jackknife crunch. So I'm going to be doing it with a dumbbell this time, so just 3 pounds. Hands straight above your head, holding onto that dumbbell. Contract those core muscles. Bring both those legs and arms up. Crunch that weight up between those feet. Slowly down on those feet, and then cross it back over into those hands. Just keep alternating back and forth. Remember, you only count the repetition once you get that weight back into your hands. Just keep it going. Keep those lungs open. Nice full range of motion. Remember, try to crunch up towards those toes as high as you possibly can with every single repetition. Now, I know this exercise is really difficult to do. I know those abs are probably going to be screaming on you like crazy, but try not to let those hands or feet touch the ground. And whatever you do, try not to let that lower back lift up off that mat too high. When you go to a full extension with those arms and legs out, that lower back's going to have a tendency to want to kind of pop up off the ground. Try to keep those abs nice and contracted and everything under control. And also, if those abs give out on you, like mine just did to me, feel free to pause for just a second and then go right back into it as soon as you feel recovered. trying to get right back into those repetitions with as little break as possible. Now we're almost done, just 2 more full repetitions left. Remember, you have to cross it into those feet, down, back into those hands. There's 1, we got 1 more to go. Back to those feet, and back up to those hands, and let it relax. Good job. All right, let's go and get ready for that next exercise, the back bows, or those dumbbells out in those hands, full extension on those arms. If you want to make this exercise even harder, you can always put ankle weights on those feet. Just makes it that much more difficult. So contract that back, lift those arms and legs up at the same time. Try to keep those arms nice and straight, keep those legs nice and straight. Trying to really focus on the most range of motion you can possibly get through with those arms and legs. Just try to keep those lungs open the entire time, and don't let those hands or feet touch the ground. Keep them hovering all the time. Almost done. And let it relax. Let's go on to our next exercise. The supine oblique rotation is our last round of this one as well. Remember, you can always put a weight in between those feet. Body weight should be plenty to start out with. So get those legs straight up above those hips, arms out nice and wide, rotating those hips, those legs left to right. Remember, it's 10 repetitions on each side, so if you're counting each side as a single one, you're going to 20. Nice, slow, controlled rotation. Again, make sure that you're not just swinging those legs around. This is a slow, controlled motion, dropping off to the side as far as you can go. Then nice, slow, controlled motion, bring those legs back up and off to the other side. Try to keep those shoulders flat down against the ground, so as you rotate left to right, try to let that chest rotate as well. This is just a rotation around those hips and that torso. Keep those lungs open, and just keep that motion going nice and clean. We're almost done, just 2 more on each side. Again, keep those lungs open, keep those muscles nice and contracted, keep those shoulders down. It's your last one over. Bring those legs back up to the center and let them relax. Nicely done. All right, we're going to give you a little bit of extra rest here. We don't want to completely kill those abs, so we're going to give you a little bit of rest to recover before you start into that next group. If you need a little bit more rest than we give you here, feel free to hit the pause button. Otherwise, we'll be starting back up in just a few seconds. Our next group is going to be a ball crunch, a ball back extension, and a ball oblique crunch on the left and right side. So you're going to need that physio ball for this exercise, or all 3 of these. So go ahead and grab that physio ball. We're going to be starting off with the ball crunch first. So grab those dumbbells, roll out onto that back so the top of that ball is right about the bottom of your rib cage. Hands over top of your head. Let your chest and hips droop over top of the ball, and then crunch them both up together like you're trying to fold your hips in towards your shoulders. Those arms should be perfectly extended straight up above your head, locked in with your rib cage. So as you crunch forward with those shoulders, those arms should move along with those shoulders. So that bicep should actually stay right next to your ear the entire time. Again, really try to focus on getting a nice tight contraction, folding those shoulders down into those hips, lifting those hips up as well. And that's your last one right there. Go ahead and let it relax. We're going to move on to a ball back extension. You're going to anchor your feet against a wall for this one if you have a wall handy. Otherwise, you can do this just out in the middle of a room just fine. So if you're up against the wall, you're going to put those toes at the base of the wall, bend those knees to kind of lock those thighs against the edge of the ball. And then you're going to wrap down over the front of the ball, get those hands down as close to the ground without touching as you can, then arch it back up as high as you can possibly go comfortably. Then again, drop it right back down again. So this is about trying to get as much range of motion, as much wrap over the front of the ball as you can, and then as much extension up towards the ceiling as you can. Always trying to keep those biceps right next to your ears. Again, trying to keep those arms locked into your rib cage so they move simultaneously. And this is your last repetition right here. Arch it back up, nice tight squeeze, and let it relax. We're switching off to a ball oblique crunch, so laying up against the wall, feet up against the wall, the leg closest to the wall is going to be up. Roll over top of that ball, staggering those feet, one in front, one behind. One hand up over top of your head, holding onto that weight, keeping that bicep right next to your ear, crunching that shoulder down towards your hip. Now you're not trying to get your shoulders up towards the ceiling, you're trying to get your shoulder down towards that hip. So really, really tight crunch, pulling that shoulder down into that hip, focusing on the top side. So in the position I'm laying, it's going to be my right side. Just keep those lungs open, keep that form nice and clean, really get a tight, tight crunch. And there's your last repetition right here. And switch sides, just flip it around. That opposite leg's going to be up against the wall this time. Laying out across that ball, hip up on that ball. Again, hips perpendicular to the ground. Arm up over your head, bicep next to your ear, and crunch that shoulder down into that hip. Now you're going to have a tendency to rotate those shoulders just a little bit. You can kind of see my shoulders are just a little bit off skew. They're not quite perpendicular to the ground, but try to keep them as perpendicular to the ground as you can. So you want to constantly be trying to force your shoulders straight up and down. And we're almost done, just 2 more repetitions. Really focus on that squeeze, pulling that shoulder down to that hip. Last one. And let it relax. All right, let's go ahead and start that round over again with that ball crunch. So sit down, lay flat on your back. Remember the top of that ball is going to be right about the base of your rib cage on that back. Hands up over your head, bicep right next to your ear. And start up. Make sure your hips and your chest are wrapping over top of that ball as much as you can. Really getting a good arch on that back before you crunch up and then pull those shoulders down towards those hips, kind of folding yourself in half, lifting those hips and those shoulders at the same time. Just keep that motion going, really focusing on getting a nice full range of motion both down and up, keeping those abs contracted the entire time. Almost done, just 2 more repetitions. And here's your last one right here, nice tight crunch at the top. And let it relax. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next, the ball back extensions for our second round of this one. Toes up against the wall. Bring that ball up against those thighs, roll over top of it, kind of locking those thighs down against the ball to kind of lock yourself against that wall. Arms up over your head, bicep next to your ear, crunching down towards the ground or dropping down towards the ground, just hovering a little bit and then crunching up. Nice tight extension, getting those shoulders up as high as you possibly can, really arching that back as much as is comfortable. Just keep those lungs open, keep focusing on that range of motion, trying to get as much of a contraction at the top of that range of motion as you can. Now just remember not to use more weight than you can control. If you feel like the amount of weight you're using is limiting your range of motion, then drop that weight down a little bit so you can get a more full range of motion. And go ahead and let that one relax. We're going to move on to our ball oblique crunch next. So up against the wall again. Remember, leg closest to the wall is the one that's going to be up. Then roll over top of that ball. Get those hips perpendicular to the ground, those shoulders perpendicular to the ground. Crunch that shoulder down into those hips as tight as you possibly can. Just keep those lungs open, keep those arms extended out straight, try to keep those biceps next to those ears as best you can. It's a nice full range of motion on those shoulders. Almost done, just 2 more repetitions. And there's your last one, crunch it up nice and tight and let it relax. All right, let's go move over to the other side. Same exact exercise, just on that opposite side, so that opposite leg comes in front, other leg behind, hips up on top of that ball, hands over your head, and start up crunching those shoulders into that hip as tight as you can. Remember, you're not trying to get those shoulders up as high as you can, you're trying to get those shoulders down into your hip as far as you can. So really focus on trying to get those shoulders to rotate left to right or rock left to right or up and down in this case, rather than trying to just push those shoulders up towards the ceiling. And we're almost done, just 2 more repetitions to go. Nice tight squeeze up, got 1 more. And let it relax, good job. All right, that is the end of that second group. Give you another little break here until we start into our third one. Now again, feel free to hit pause if you need a little bit more of a rest. All right, let's go and get ready for group number 3. We're going to be doing crunches, swimmers, and a side hip raise on both the left and the right side for this group. So we're going to be back down on the mat. So let's go ahead and get ready for those crunches, laying flat on your back. Let's go ahead and use those dumbbells again. Get those hands over top of your head, bicep next to that ear. Contract those abdominal muscles, get them nice and tight, and start up. Crunch those shoulders up off the ground as high as you possibly can. Again, if you feel like the amount of weight you're using is limiting your range of motion, then drop that weight either down or off completely. Focus on getting as much range of motion as you can first, and then slowly start increasing the weight as you can, still getting that full range of motion. Just keep it going, keep those lungs open, nice tight crunch at the top. And let it relax. Go ahead and move to swimmers. So flat on your stomach, arms out, left arm, right leg, right arm, left leg, alternating back and forth, trying to keep those hands and feet hovering up off the ground. Make sure you're counting only on one side. Just keep moving back and forth. Again, if you want to make this one a little bit harder, you can always put ankle weights on your legs as well. That'll just increase the intensity on that lower back and those glutes. And go ahead and let it relax. Let's move to our side hip raise, starting on that left side first. Those dumbbells or whatever weight you're using, you're put up on top of that hip, going to a full extension, so those legs all the way out, your arm fully extended. Drop that hip as low as you can down towards the ground, and then shove that hip up really nice and high into the air, as high as you possibly can, focusing on pulling your shoulder down towards your hip on the bottom side. So you actually want to feel like you're almost tucking your shoulder down underneath you. Now we're almost done. Keep focusing on that range of motion. Nice tight squeeze every time you bring those hips up. And let it relax. Go and switch sides. We're going to do the same exact exercise on the opposite side. Arms and legs out straight. Weight up on top of that opposite side of that hip. And start up. Bring those hips up. Crunch them up nice and high. Really contract that shoulder down to that hip. Drop those hips back down to the ground as close to the ground as you can without completely touching. Then press those hips right back up again. Make sure you're keeping those lungs open. Make sure you're moving nice and slow, under control. Don't just swing those hips around. You want a slow contraction up and back down. And let it relax. Let's go and start back over again with that crunch. Laying flat on your back. Grab those dumbbells again over top of your head. And start up. Crunch those shoulders up as high as you possibly can. Get a nice full range of motion. Again, keeping that bicep right next to your ear the entire time. Locking those arms into that rib cage. Now, as you drop those shoulders back down to the mat, make sure those abdominal muscles do not release. You want to always keep them contracted nice and tight. Keep that lower back relatively flat against that mat. Don't try to let that lower back lift up off the ground too high. Just keep that motion going. Nice tight crunch. Make sure those lungs are open. And let it relax. Back to those swimmers, so over onto your stomach. And start them up. Right arm, left leg, left arm, right leg, alternating back and forth. Remember, counting only on one side. Keep those arms and legs hovered, never letting them actually completely touch the ground. Constantly trying to get as much range of motion out of this as you can. And let it relax. Let's go ahead and move back to that last round of the side hip raises on that left side first. Weight up on top of that hip. Arm fully extended, legs fully extended. And start them up. Hips up nice and high. Drop them down as close to the ground as you can without touching. Right back up again, keeping those lungs open and a nice slow controlled motion. Even as you start getting tired, try not to let your body start telling you to move quickly. It's going to want to, but try to keep everything under control, nice and slow, with a tight squeeze at the top of that range of motion. And let it relax. You can do the same thing on the other side. Go ahead and switch over, get those feet back out nice and straight. Get that weight up on top of that hip, that arm extended straight. That hip hovering just a little bit off the ground. And start it up. Crunch that hip up nice and high, pulling that shoulder down to that hip, and then nice and slow, drop those hips back down towards the ground with a little bit of a hover underneath them. Just keep it going, keep those lungs open, keep those shoulders and hips perpendicular to the ground. We're almost done. Just one more. And nice and slow, let it down and let it relax. Good job. That was our last repetition of our last exercise, which means this workout is complete. I hope you enjoyed it.